Right. Welcome back to our post-webinar Q&A on skills management, best practices to maximize your talent with Sid Mills, Julie McKelvey, and Ollie Meager. Welcome back, the three of you. We now have a little bit of time to basically dive into all the remaining questions from our webinar. And it will be a very interesting follow-up. So thanks everyone who has put some questions into the Q&A, and thanks the three of you for taking some time to have a look at them. Welcome. Nice. So let's kick off. We have Rajesh with our first beautiful question, which goes like this. What metrics or KPIs do you recommend for measuring the return on investment of skills management programs? And how can organizations track the impact on business outcomes? Who wants to tackle that first question? I see Julie and Ollie unmuted. Ollie, do you want to?
Yeah, I can. It's a great question because I think it's really important as well. And there can be so many things to track. So to try and put it into two separate buckets, and I'm sure Julie will have a much better answer than me on this. But from a KPI perspective, when looking at resource management specifically, looking at things like time to staff a project, to talent utilization rate, kind of true kind of talent metrics is one thing. But then also there's the ecosystem component of like going back to what we were talking about in the webinar around linking, tying to business outcomes and tying to business metrics, is finding out the benchmark data first so that you actually have something to track against. Probably one of the best examples, Julie, again, you're going to have a better example than me from a resource management lens specifically, but one of the best examples that we've got working with a client, I can't name them on this one just purely because it's more sensitive business metric data, but this company, they had around 400 cyber engineers, and they were going to put these 400 cyber engineers through an upskilling initiative. And their reasoning for doing that is because they hadn't done any upskilling this year. It's like, well, that's not exactly the best reason to put people through an upskilling initiative. So we worked with this client for quite a while to understand what's the true business reason. What the true business reason actually was this organization was being fined $1 million for every single cyber breach. So if you can start to understand how many cyber breaches there are a year, how much money is it costing the organization on those cyber breaches? Okay, we've got benchmark business data, put 400 cyber engineers through upskilling. And, I know there's a question later on about rubrics. We were actually using rubrics to be able to say, okay, if we've upskilled 400 cyber engineers from a level 4 to a level 5, and the impact on the business was actually there were 36 less cyber breaches in a financial year, the business impact is $36 million. Okay, and if that upskilling initiative costs $1.5 million, there's a return on investment of 34.5. So it's really understanding that benchmark data and tying into that, because that's a very good news story that can travel very, very fast up the chain in any size of organization.
Love it, Ollie. Thanks for that great example. Julie, keen to hear your view of the resource management lens.
Yeah, I think that when you look at resource management KPIs, skills is a hard one, right? To put actual data behind. I think employee retention, employee growth are some things to focus on. I also think, revenue accuracy, bookings accuracy is another one. Are they actually working what they've been booked? And if they're not, skills would definitely be a place to look to see if that's the miss within that metric. Goodness, there's so many. Like Ollie said, oh my gosh, we could give 100 examples of all the things that tie into. I think really just looking at KPIs, I'm not sure I would try to put a definite metric in place, to be honest. But I think focusing on some of the other underlying KPIs that could be related to that might be the better plan of attack to do that.
Nice. Thank you so much, Julie. Sid, how about you?
Yeah, no, I agree with all that's been said. I think time to staff is kind of the initial one that everyone thinks of. Um, I also think that there could be an element in your risk management process. If you're tracking risk on projects, measuring, if there are resource changes that need to happen due to lack of skills, or if there's a risk that's been brought up, in a RAID log or whatever the company uses, that attaches back to, resource mismatch. That might be something to look at as well. But again, like Julie said, I don't know if it's a traditional KPI. It's just an interesting indicator to see how that skills matrix is assisting in the process.
Beautiful. All three lenses, are so valuable. Thanks so much. I love how you complement each other so well. And moving on to question number 2. This one is also posed by Rajesh. So thank you. How can the skills focus group that we talked about during our webinar align its efforts with individual career development plans to ensure employees see personal value in participating? Julie, why don't you kick us off this time?
Sure. I think having someone that is a technical resource as part of that focus group, even if they're not someone who attends every quarter or every month or whatever that cadence is you set, is important, because chances are if they're thinking it, you have other technical resources thinking about it, right? And anytime someone has a voice in what their future is and what they're interested in, and you can incorporate that into any kind of training plan, you're going to get greater buy-in, right? Their voice now matters. You care about their career growth. And I think that, including them as well, like many employee resource groups that companies have set up, will also give them the ability to have a completely different perspective, probably than anyone else in that group, because they're the ones out in the weeds doing the work.
Amen. Yes. Again, here we're helping to break down silos, right? And creating, a diverse group. So we have a more holistic view on what's really important to the people in the organization. Thank you, Sid. Thank you, Julie. Sid, would you like to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I feel like it's super important to also include career pathing in skills management. I guess one thing I would add is just making sure that that's reflected on your skills matrix or skills database in some way. So if you have, a text measurement of, early to proficient, you may have one added in called learn, so that they're at least showing on the matrix, and you can determine, when you're scheduling someone who's more proficient, you can then schedule the person who has learn as their marking. Or if it's numbers, I've done 1 to 3 or 1 to 5 scale, and then I've included like -1. And the negative is someone who is wanting to learn. So I think that that's important, just so that that's seen and can be actioned.
That's a nice trick. Thank you, Sid. Ollie, how about you?
Oh, wow, there's so much we can go into with this particular question. So, oh gosh, there's so much. So I think making the process really transparent is key. Like, employees should be able to clearly see how skills mapping connects to career progression. And, you can look at career progression in a number of different ways, right? So it could be, the career pathing, right, Sid, that you were just talking about. Being able to create those personalized career pathways. So instead of like generic training plans, is letting employees map their skills to specific career outcomes. So you can use that skills-based career framework as part of that. It's the old adage of the WIFM, right, as we call it, the what's in it for me. You know, if you build expertise in X, then these are the roles that you could move into from a pathway perspective. But also using, you know, when we're thinking of career development plans, it's using skills data then as well to enable internal mobility. Those employees need to see that direct path from, you know, whether it's like skills assessments, ratings, whatever we want to call it, they need to see it, the path to new roles. They need to see the path to promotions or project opportunities. So if I'm an employee and I'm developing AI skills, then the system should surface AI related opportunities so that I start to kind of really get involved. And I think taking it one further step on what the skills focus group can do is like recognize and reward skills growth. Like whether it's a comms thing or whether it's a pay thing, like whatever it might be, but publicly acknowledge employees who do upskill and take on new challenges. There's nothing like a bit of public acknowledgement that then makes other employees think, oh, okay, you know, everyone likes a pat on the back and everyone says, likes a, oh, well done, you've done really well there. And it just kind of just fosters this culture, I think, then of continuous learning.
Oh, I love that so much. And I think this is such a missed opportunity in most organizations is actually to celebrate the employees and growth and learning. Oh, yes. That
Nora, Ollie said something that triggered one more thought for me. From a resource management perspective, the other thing I think is really important to make sure that they understand you're dedicated to their career growth is actually putting in bookings and allocations for that career growth. So they can track it. They have a timeline. They have clearly defined objectives to get done. Treat it basically like just another project they're assigned to. And I think that that also helps to keep them on track. And then, you know, let them know. And you can even do, like, say they're working on a level 1 to 2 for this 2-month time period. When that's over, you can go ahead and put a soft booking in or a soft allocation in for the next phase of that to show them that you're dedicated not only to what they're doing right now, but to the long-term picture of that.
Very nice. I see Sid nodding.
I love that. I love that because yeah, it's another visual that they can see on their calendar, and it's just very encouraging.
Amazing. Wonderful. Moving on to Mayank's question. In software as a service organizations, when focusing on skill development, do you prioritize building functional expertise or enhancing technical skills? And maybe whoever wants to take this question first can also just help us understand how to really differentiate functional versus technical skills. So would you like to start?
Sure, I can jump in. Yeah, so I'm thinking that the person asking this question is asking about functional knowledge for the product, the SaaS product that the company has developed and has out in the world versus, you know, external technical skills in the world. That's kind of how I'm taking it. I would say both, both and. Um, you definitely want to be ramping up on external technical skills as the world develops and changes. And it's important to have that knowledge to aid in further development of the SaaS product and make it better at the company, you know, the continuous growth and learning that we've been talking about. But I also feel it's super important to delve in deeply into the SaaS product because that's really the communication point with the customer. And being the SaaS expert at the company is huge. So I would maybe prioritize the SaaS knowledge, but always have the technical skills in play as well.
Nice. Thank you. Ollie?
It's such a tough question that I'm going to try not to answer it with it depends, but it kind of does. So bear with me. Right. So I think it depends on the business goals of the SaaS org, right? But both functional expertise and technical skills are, I think, equally important. But it is going to depend on the company's growth stage, what their strategic priorities are, and product complexity. Now, you could kind of bucket it, say, for early stage SaaS companies, the functional expertise is key because you've got to be able to take something to market. For scaling or more mature SaaS companies, then the technical skills are going to gain priority, but it's not like one is far more important than the other. But I would kind of, to answer your question, Nora, as functional expertise, that's more like business and customer focused type of skills, like customer success, sales. When you're breaking into new markets, it requires a deep domain knowledge, but it's not necessarily so technical. Whereas, technical skills, they're obviously product and engineering focused. And I think you need to be able to prioritize technical skills if the company is scaling engineering teams, for instance, like rapidly. And we're seeing that, I think, across the market now, like when product complexity increases, like, I don't know about everyone else, like, not only between us four, but everyone listening and everything and everyone in the world, what is going on with SaaS and technology right now is just genuinely quite terrifying. Like product complexity is just bonkers. So the need right now to upskill and focus on technical skills, I think, is greater than maybe it was 3 years ago, just because of what's happening with AI. And it's not just talking about large language models and generative AI, it's like agentic AI right now. So technical skills are a massive, massive focus. But I think from a best practice perspective, I think it's a hybrid approach. Really, I think the best SaaS companies balance those functional and technical skill developments in the right way because they base it on the role types. So they'll base it, sales, customer success versus the sales engineers, data scientists, etc., and are able to have that approach where they link it to the business priorities and identify the skills that they need to develop in the right place at the right time. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. But I think if customer adoption and business growth are the focus, like that's prioritizing functional expertise. I think if scaling the product and engineering roadmap is the focus, that's when you've got to prioritize the technical skills.
Nice, nice. Well done approaching this beast of a question, both of you. Julie, anything you would like to add?
No, having not worked in the SaaS world, I'm going to yield to the two experts that have already shared their knowledge and say, yes, I agree with everything they've said.
Also important to get some appreciation and backing. Thanks, Julie. All right, so moving on to question number 4 and also the last question from Kay. Thank you, Kay, for sharing this question. What is the standard terminology rating rubric for rating skills? I've seen novice, beginner, all the way to advanced, certified professional. How many ratings should we have? So a few questions in here. Julie, do you want to kick off?
Sure. So I think, just like everything else in your skills inventory, you want to keep this kind of simple. I would say no more than 5. And then, of course, if you want to add the learning in as well, that could be a 6th, but not necessarily defined as well as the 5. I don't think it matters if you use numbers or if you use words. The skills inventory that I built, we kept very simple. We used 3. We used beginner, intermediate, and experts. And we also took that, and our experts were designated as people who could train lower level proficiencies on that skill. So that really kept it easy when we were putting together training plans as well. I think as long as you stay consistent and you define them and communicate what those definitions are, you can't go wrong.
I love it. It makes it so practical, Julie. Thank you. Totally resonates. Ollie, what's your view?
Oh, the rubric question. So I think, we were talking earlier about a common language of skill. I think it's also very important then when we're starting to look at ratings or proficiency levels that there's a common language across the organization as well. And yeah, to some extent, it's like, is it 1 to 3? Is it 1 to 4? Is it 1 to 5? I've seen 1 to 8 as well, and that's definitely too much. Julie, I think I agree with you in that, like, maybe no more than 5. I think 5 tends to be a good amount because you can delineate between the different level of skills between different people. But I think regardless of what your proficiency or rating leveling is, whether it's a number, whether it's a kind of a tag or a description, the actual description of that proficiency level is more important than the proficiency level itself. Because if we think we're going to be like self-rating, manager rating, peer rating, it can get very, very subjective. And that's where you get inaccuracies of skill data, right? But if the description is very, very clear, that allows for more objectivity in that process, I think that is kind of the number one piece of advice that I would say.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ollie. Just a follow-up question on that. Is it really necessary to have a description for each skill, or is it enough to give descriptions to our rating rubric? So it's probably going to save a lot of time if we just define 1 through 5. And then it's basically a description of any skill, whether it be technical or soft, or do we have to really go down into detailing out every single skill in terms of what it means, a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
Yeah, I think for the specificity of this answer, it's defining the rubric. It's at the rubric level to be able to kind of define or describe or explain the exact proficiency level. Much more mature skills-based organizations do go down to kind of skill description, but for the purpose of the person that was asking this question, it's like define your proficiency levels and explain what that proficiency level means in terms of the description of that proficiency level. That's most important. The only other thing I would add is whether you're deciding on numbers of proficiency or a like novice, beginner, advanced level, that kind of example, is make sure that there's alignment across your talent ecosystem. Quite often that kind of goes to the point of where is the source of truth for somebody's skill rating. That might be in an HRIS, for instance. So if you're using a workday that's like a 1 to 5, for example, then it's probably best to use a 1 to 5 rubric on the other technologies or inventories or management tools that you've got in place, because at some point down the line you'll end up unpacking problems if there's like differences between systems.
Oh, that's such a good call out. So Workday might have 5 levels, you mentioned. And then if I use a different system in my organization, so it would be a good advice to check that first before deciding on which rating rubric we want to go down with. Okay, very good call out. Thank you, Ollie.
And Nora, to build on that, I think those details matter more when you're creating those training plans, right? To level up on that particular skill. That's where you would more break down, to go from a level 1 to a level 2. Here are the additional skills you're going to need.
Yeah, nice. So of course, the more detail we have, the more value we can get, right? So then the planning side of things becomes, easier. Yeah, totally agree. Nice. Sid, what are your reflections on rating rubric terminology for rating skills?
Yeah, not much to add here. I feel like, everything was covered. I feel like the biggest thing for me is just really having definition, like what is the difference between 1 and 2 and 3? And if you're going from 1 to 5, what's 3, 4? What's the difference there? Just making sure that you have a clear description, like what was talked about, clear delineation between the levels.
Awesome. Thanks for your additions. So we have come to the end of the questions we have received during the webinar. So to wrap up, I would like to pose a final question to the three of you. Now that we have had an absolute joy in covering this topic of skills management, what is one key takeaway you're taking from our exploration of this topic? And whoever wants to start can start. Maybe
I
Ollie?
can start.
Oh, fantastic. Nice.
Go Sid, go Sid, go.
Key takeaway, it's a complex topic, and it really depends on the organization. And so for me, I feel like it takes teamwork and communication and continuous learning. You know, talking about this topic, talking with your peers, involving other departments, talking with other resource managers. I think that that's key. Since every business is so different, it's important to just exchange ideas and keep the conversation going.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Sid. Ollie, would you like to comment?
You're picking on me, Nora.
Just because you're smart.
I've no, I was just thinking it's been really nice to talk about, we can go all kind of blue sky and high level thinking and ecosystem focused on all things skills. And we were mentioning it's this catch-all term that is confusing a lot of people. But bringing it back to a resource management context, it's really refreshing to, I certainly thought about it, but it's refreshing to talk about the fact that nothing's really changed in terms of we're still just talking about putting the right people in the right place at the right time for the right cost, learning the right things, etc. Like that stuff hasn't changed. We've just got an opportunity to make that process a little bit more efficient, a little bit more optimized with the use of skills data. So I've just, almost like on a selfish standpoint, I've found it really nice to kind of bring it back to the, we're still talking about right people, right place, right time, right cost again.
Yeah, that's a relief, right? Nice. Thanks, Ollie. And Julie, I would like to hand over to you for the closing final reflections.
Sure. So I guess my final thoughts would be, big or small, it's a huge undertaking. Give yourself grace. Give all the stakeholders you're working with some grace. Start simple. Remember that it's a living, breathing thing, and you're always going to make changes. Your first to go at it might not be the best one. You might have to change things. So just keep that in mind. Just getting started is already a huge success to celebrate. So if you get some hiccups along the way, or if it's a complete disaster, don't consider it a failure, because tackling it in itself is a success.
Amazing. Awesome. I would absolutely like to, double click on everything the three of you have said. And it just kind of stands out to me as I listen to you and our conversation. I took away so many things, but something I would really like to highlight is whoever's listening, you're not alone. Everyone is embarking on this journey, maybe at different maturity stages, but let's make use of that incredible knowledge in the community. Even just looking at two incredible resource managers here in the call, Sid and Julie, make sure to connect, to exchange, to really see this as, an effort of the resource management community. And also there are amazing people with smart brains like Ollie, who can support endeavors in this space and have some really good strategies and experiences from having done this so many times. Even partners like Run can help, because we're all in the same kind of arena. So yeah, maybe let's connect, let's share what has worked well, what we are sensing, what we're learning, and grow together, because this is basically the idea of LEAP. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for a wonderful webinar and an amazing post-webinar Q&A deep dive. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.